Hello, friends. Welcome to another edition of This Week in Twitter. We got a big show today, as with us as always, Alana Joy.
Morning,
say hello.
everyone.
Mike Bracco,
Hello,
reading the
hello.
news, and our special guest today, Mr. Mike Prasad. I have a little intro written about you. Founder and director of the social media marketing and branding agency, the M Consultancy, and the head of technology for exclusive social network Black Card Circle. He's also the co-founder of the female gaming online community, girlgamer.com. But perhaps best known for being the former social media guru for Kogi BBQ, the man commonly credited with the explosion of tweeting food trucks all around the country over the past year or so. Please welcome Mike Prasad.
Thank you. Hello, hello.
Welcome to the show, Mike. Thanks for coming in. So we usually start. We'll do a little sort of intro discussion. We'll do the tool of the week, the tip of the week. We'll do some news, and then we'll talk to you because obviously lots of Twitter-themed conversations that we could have.
Awesome.
That I think people would be interested to hear. So you have something, Alana, that you wanted to discuss here at the top.
So I started this little project. It's a Facebook protest, and I started it yesterday to give myself 1 month. I picked June 6th to be the day that I want to do it because it's D-Day, so I thought that was kind of like a cool, right?
So what better way to honor our World War II veterans than protesting Facebook?
Well, but it's, D-Day is also listed the day that, something, a mission.
A massive onslaught happens,
Exactly.
right?
So I thought that was
the beginning
clever.
of the war, yes. Well, what are you protesting exactly?
Well, I have always had a strong dislike for Facebook and kind of was brought there like as an obligation almost. Everybody's there. My grandmother's there. My sister's there.
You felt that you had to be there.
I feel like I had to be there. But what my real issue is right now is with the privacy breaches and all these things. For example, Facebook gave us our privacy preferences and we could set them, and then they turned around and changed their policy so that things that users had previously set to private are no longer private; they're public.
Stuff
and what
like
they're doing,
what pages you're visiting,
what pages you're
like,
visiting, who you're friends with,
where you went to school,
where you went to school, what you like, what you don't like, all kinds of demographic information. But again, it's a lot of sites gather that information.
Right.
What a lot of sites don't do, though, is take the things that you specifically said you don't want to share and change their policy and share it anyway without an opt-out. I also don't like the fact that you can't really ever delete your profile. You can deactivate your profile and all your information stays there. Mark Zuckerberg has gone on record as saying that he doesn't believe in privacy. Which, I may be taking that out of context. I'm reading this from articles and everything.
Yeah, I mean, he said, like, people don't care about privacy. Privacy's not open is the new model, I think, or something like that.
And I agree with open. What I don't agree with is exploiting your users' information, especially information that they've already said they don't want to share. So what I'm asking people to do is to follow the Twitter account so that they can be counted.
Which
is?
It's
at Facebook Protest. And I'm working on the website, which will hopefully be up in the by Monday is my goal. And the website's not going to be that complicated, just the basic information on what Facebook protest is about. And what I'm asking people to do is not even to delete their accounts, since you can't, but but to just simply make sure you're logged out on the night of the 5th, and then on the 6th, don't log in.
So just don't log into Facebook that entire day.
My logic is that, last year I read in an article that Facebook made somewhere around $550 million, and that this year they're expected to make somewhere between $1 to $1.2 billion. So do the math. If a large enough group of people doesn't log in for one day, it will affect them on a millions of dollars type level. So, maybe then Zuckerberg will go, okay, privacy does matter.
But, I mean, aren't there, it seems almost like, let's just go somewhere else. I mean, if it's that important, if the company is that poor, aren't there any viable alternatives to Facebook? I mean, has he really threaded the needle so perfectly that there's nothing else that can replace it?
MySpace. Like, I know it's like, MySpace, and here's this, social media professional saying that, but I'll tell you what.
MySpace.
I was LOLing
That's your suggestion.
I was LOLing at MySpace a year ago, okay? But I gotta say, MySpace is making a lot of changes. One of my clients has a very popular MySpace page. I've been spending a little bit more time on there. And, aside from the fact that there's, the glitter graphics and all that, I do see that going away. They've actually
glitter graphics.
They've actually began to incorporate some really great profiles. They have a 2.0 profile right now, and they're about to roll out a 3.0 profile. And it's really cool because you can, unlike Facebook, customize your page still. But now you can take out areas that you don't want, or move pieces around. There's blocks, and you literally just drag the stuff where you want it to go. And I really think I might revamp my MySpace page, and I will probably keep my Facebook page. I'm not trying to get people to leave Facebook unless that's what they want to do.
You're hoping that enough people get together that you could sort of send a message to Facebook that, hey,
I think Facebook has,
these are issues we care about.
Of course, Facebook has obviously huge potential, obviously, but at the same time, it's almost like a tweet that I sent off that account last night. With great power comes great responsibility. It's true.
Isn't that from a movie?
But it's huge, and it's being very irresponsible, I think. And and like I also said on the account last night, it's either Zuckerberg saying that he doesn't believe in privacy, at best is really just stupid marketing.
Right.
And at worst, it really is a slippery slope into what the internet could turn into 5 to 10 years from now if this sets a precedent that these kinds of things are okay. That you can set your preferences to say, I don't want to share XYZ about myself, and the site just decides, you know what? We're going to change our terms of service, and we're going to do whatever we want, and there's nothing that you can do about it. That's scary. That is very scary. And we have to take responsibility and kind of do what we can. It's not like some people DM'd me yesterday, and they're like, well, I just don't see the point. Well, people could have said that to a lot of innovators in the past, or people who stood up to things. I don't see the point.
I think it's just there is a sense out there, and I know some people were saying this in the chat room, that these kinds of protests, they kind of come together. It's always sort of a fad thing, and everybody joins in. And then what really? I mean, there's how many Facebook groups are there that say, let's get 10 million people to join, and then Betty White will be president or something.
Expectations. I'm not going to do any, hardcore adding people and seeking out. I really want it to be viral. I'm not gonna, I want to build the account in an authentic way so that whether it's 100 people or 100,000 people or 1 million people, it was something that was very grassroots, and it's a statement. It's not some fad thing. It's something that's gonna be from now until the 6th. And then it'll, maybe it'll make an impact. I'm hoping that it will. I'm hoping that maybe it'll drum up some attention to the cause as well, just in general. And we'll see.
Cool. Yeah. All right, we got to get to Twitter.
One quick thing, one quick tip for users, because I know Facebook privacy settings can be a craze to go through. There's a great site, zesty.ca/Facebook. So if you go to zesty.ca/Facebook, you can just put in your username, and it will show you all the things from all the various aspects of your profile that are visible to the public, and that application developers can use.
It's on my screen.
So it's a great resource because, as I said, Facebook settings to view, what's private, what's public, who can see what. This is just an easy way to see what is public. So
what scares me though is that we could do that before, and then they just oh, we're going to change it, and then they changed it, and then we get change it again, and change it again, and what about a pop-up box that says this site, no matter, regardless of your privacy settings, this site will share to proceed, press, whatever. I think the government
honestly,
needs to
I think
step in.
that Facebook and MySpace are great players in the market, but Facebook does a lot. They're both going in the right direction overall in terms of progressing the platform, but they're both doing it the completely wrong way. I think MySpace is actually catching up, and Facebook is just doing it wrong. And they have a history of doing that, right? If I had $1 million, I would start a Facebook competitor. That's what I would do.
Yeah,
and that's people are like, oh, Facebook. But there's such an open spot for someone to come up and say this is a better way to do it.
Well, and that's already happened. I mean, Friendster was the unstoppable social media
and MySpace, and
Titan, and then MySpace, and then Facebook.
It's time for another one.
Yeah, and it does feel like that is sort of inevitable. That there's never going to be one player that dominates for 100 years of one social network. It's always going to be.
But I do think there'll be one. I think whatever site really ingrains themselves in the next 2 years is going to be kind of stable for a while.
Yeah. Okay. Twitter, because it's a Twitter show. We gotta get back to this. Let's do the tool of the week with our very own Mike Bracco.
So we have an interesting one this week. Flirt140.com is a Twitter dating site. So basically, you.
Our former guest, AV Phlox, only dates men she meets on Twitter.
Yeah.
So this would be useful for her.
So it's a pretty simple site. It's actually created by @Pud, who is Phil Kaplan.
Ah, right. Creator of Blippy.
Yes. So it's basically you sign in, you're a guy looking for a girl or whatever you happen to be, enter your zip code, and it shows you the results. And actually, other people who sign up, you can private message them, you can wink at them.
Nice.
Can you poke them?
I can't wink it. No poke.
Look at go back to the screen. Look at how big this is. Like the tagline of what traits people are looking for. Look at how big entrepreneur is.
Wow.
This is a select group on here. I think. Like they're looking for a cute, tall, sexy, funny entrepreneur. There you go.
So it's kind of fun. It's
telling.
interesting. Some people use Twitter for that, I guess. So.
I'm sorry. Who here at this table has ever tried to pick up on someone on Twitter? Anyone? Is that a thing?
I've flirted on Twitter.
Wow.
But
I actually
yeah.
haven't, which is funny, but I don't know. I know a lot of people that have.
It seems like, that's a good amount of writing for, sending a link or getting people to visit your blog. But, can you really get to know somebody in 140 characters? I mean, is it like you use it basically like I am?
Exclusively on Twitter? No, I don't think that's, yeah.
But even if you met somebody that you hadn't met in real life on Twitter,
Yeah.
would you get any sense of what they were like as a person just from their tweets?
No, the people I've flirted with on Twitter, I've met before.
Right, so it's really just
yeah.
sort of using Twitter as part of an overall flirtation. I think that makes more sense to me than I'm going to meet some hot
Part of
person on
Alana's
Twitter.
digital flirtation strategy.
Yeah, totally. I see how well that's working.
Give us what number one digital flirtation tip. Let's make this show useful for once.
Maybe just I would just say putting out there what you're about. I think if you have enough people interact with you all day, and the worst thing you want is you don't want someone to get the wrong impression of you.
Right.
I think just doing what you do and just being straightforward, transparency is always great, right?
Yeah.
And that leads to the right connections. I would think.
I keep tweeting that I love candles and long walks on the beach. I don't know. Can't get that to come together. Okay, so that was the tool. Quite a tool of the week. Thank you for that one. It's time for the tip of the week. I always called it the twip of the week, which would be embarrassing. And it's I wanted to talk a little bit about Twitter backgrounds. I think not enough people pay attention. I don't. It's a good example. I was looking at my own Twitter page, and I just did something to be sort of goofy years ago, where I did this stucco background that looks like an old Windows wallpaper. And I think it amused me at the time, and I never have thought about it again. And the more I'm going around to other places, I realize I make decisions about who to follow sometimes based just on the quality of the background that
I've been
person is
turned off
using.
by it and been like,
Right. If somebody has a really ugly, gross background, I'm sort of less inclined to follow that person. If somebody has a really well-designed, stylish one, I think this person probably knows what they're doing.
Well, I think it's the extension of the whole profile picture, right? If you had no profile picture, you were probably a bot or someone that you didn't care about. But then if you had a whole profile picture, then it's okay, well, they have a picture of something, so that communicates a message. But I think 2 years ago, actually a year ago, I was at a panel and with another social media quote-unquote expert, and they were going on about how important the color of your Twitter background is, the most important thing, the number one tip for Twitter, your Twitter background. And I was
number one tip.
And then Guy Kawasaki
If it's
was monitoring.
red, people get hungry.
Well, and then Guy Kawasaki, he's monitoring. He asked me, and he's like, "So does Kogi Barbecue have a Twitter background?" And I'm like, "No, we've never had one. I think we might now, but for the first year, we had no Twitter background because the focus wasn't on anyone on the computer. It was being mobile. And I think now that you have kind of more mainstream people coming on Twitter and Twitter changing up the homepage and all these new changes, then it puts more of an emphasis on the site, like the paid ads and search and all that good stuff. So there's more of an emphasis on the site itself. Therefore, it becomes more relevant. But I don't know if it's necessarily make or break.
Also, it's I think as the Twitter site itself, like twitter.com, as Twitter evolves, more and more people are using just Twitter, like me.
Right.
And so then you do see that background. And it is important as far as it is a branding opportunity that you're either using or not taking advantage of. But I don't think it's the end-all be-all.
Yeah. No, I think it's as it becomes a engagement point for other brands, especially brands. I mean, like Pepsi and Virgin America and all those, they have really cool, well-done pages. Sony has a really cool one, too. And if I'm on the web and I'm clicking through and I want to see their active, it's great for that. But I think when you're dealing with your average person like us, friends of friends, like I'm on my mobile client or I'm on my TweetDeck, you know, I'm not.
I've designed Twitter backgrounds though for people who are actually, all of the Twitter backgrounds that I've designed have been for people who have a smaller venture and they are trying, you know, like.
But still for business purpose though.
For business purpose,
so that
yeah.
makes sense,
Well, I think the other thing is when you're just like deciding who to follow, that's like the one time you may go to twitter.com is to look at somebody's profile and see all that, like the bio and everything. Like there are mobile clients that will do that for you. Like Brizzly, I know you can check the bio right there. But I mean, I'll give you a good example of what I'm talking about. Let's bring up my screen right now. This is at Jonathan360, and it's really simple. It's not distracting you from. It's not distracting you from what you're reading, like the content of the page. But it's really like, oh, that actually makes it look worse. It's really like cool looking. It's really personalized, and I like how he did it. Like he put Scotch tape down there and the wood paneling on the background. It's just simple but effective, and it lets you know who he is. It identifies him, and exactly like Mike thought. I thought that was a great point. It's got a bigger photo of him. It's like, this is a real person. This is a guy. Here's what he looks like. He's holding a camera. You learn a lot about him just from this little sort of image. And yeah, I mean, I think that's really well designed, and I look at stuff like that and I'm like, oh, I'm a doofus. I got to make mine better. So I put together actually some tips that I found on the web that I heard from other people on what to do to design like a cool background. The first one is you got to do the proper dimensions. A lot of people get the dimensions slightly off, and that's how you get those backgrounds where the most important part of the image is being blocked by Twitter because they didn't figure it out. So 2048 pixels by 1707 is like the ideal, is what I gathered, but you can also do 1600 by 1200. The other one is decide on a theme, and if you have other sites that are similar, you have your blog or your whatever, other sort of personal profile pages, a consistent theme is really cool. It lets people sort of recognize you not just by your face, but by your sort of theme or your personality. We talked about having a photo. In some cases, people were using like catchy taglines, which I thought was cool. I know we discussed your catchy tagline the other week in a negative way, but sometimes you can come up with a good.
No, my tagline is amuse.
Tagline,
Pixel Pimp is for fun, but
that was the one I wasn't crazy about. But something catchy like that, but better. You know what I'm saying?
but better.
Another thing I really liked about Jonathan's that I mentioned is it's clean. It's not too busy. A lot of the time when people use like the tile patterns, it's so like jarring. You almost can't stand to look at the page.
The design nightmare.
And it's pulling your eyes away from what they should be reading.
Color, no repeat.
Yeah, like that right, and especially when they're using like small pictures that then repeat and have those jarring angles. It just you don't want to look at that. I don't know.
Well, John says Twitter backgrounds, even good ones. iPad, not so much.
Yeah, that's true. The iPad, the screen dimensions just don't. Maybe if you turn around on the side.
It's definitely an opportunity to brand yourself.
Try.
So I think more people should think about it because a lot of people will, especially if you put your Twitter on your card or if it's on your website, people will click and wind up on the Twitter page. So it's something to think about, and if it's not going to hurt if you don't have it, but it's always impressive if you do, and it is a good opportunity.
I like the ones that have the like with the bigger brands, the ones that have the bullet point initiatives on what they're doing. Yeah, they'll have like really short bullet points of either like what they're doing, or they're like if it's Sony style, they have like their campaigns, or I've seen a lot of different ones, but it gives you like a quick synopsis of what's up with that account, specifically that account. So it may not be the whole brand, but it may be like what that account's doing in relation to the brand, which goes beyond the bio, which is really great.
Well, so let me ask you about this. What do you guys think of this one? Let's pull up my screen. This is Comcast Cares. It's a little busy, right? I mean, am I crazy?
That's too much
a lot
text.
of text. Yeah. I mean, I like when they give you like a little info about what you're looking at.
It's too much.
But this is like an essay.
Like, short bullet points.
Yeah,
I mean,
short.
The whole
write a
classic
blog
thing.
post on the side.
Yeah, it's like right. It's too much.
Well, it's a classic. If a newspaper had all headlines, there would be no headlines because they're all exactly the same weight. I mean, you got to have. You can have 5 headlines and it works, but you had 20.
A lot of the big accounts too will put, if there's more than one person tweeting for them, if there's like a team of 5 people or 10 people, they'll say, who tweets for us, and it'll say their personal Twitters
that's
too.
Definitely handy.
No, that's a great, and actually that's pretty key, I think, for what we were talking about. Is like it lets them know who the actual person is. It's not just some corporation being like sending out press releases. It's like a real person that will talk to you. And somebody from the chat room sent in MIA's Twitter, so I'm pulling it up right now so you can take a look at her background. So here we go. It's like YouTube broken virus
Wow, yeah.
kind of look. You know, I mean, obviously she's
music,
got.
though. That's her thing.
Right.
Like her
I was
clothing
gonna
line
say
is busy, 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 busy.
Obviously, she's got her own style that suits her, and that's what people sort of expect when they go look her up.
I'm not going to hate on MIA.
No, I'm not. Well, she'll shoot you.
I love her. I don't know.
No, she's great. She's great. And, I mean, I think that this is an example of somebody who has like a sort of very specific sense of their own style. And she was a video artist, I think, before she was a musician.
She actually, one of her videos just got taken down off of YouTube for
Yes.
being OMG.
So
or
shocking.
something. I haven't seen it yet.
Don't say OMG.
I'm saying OMG.
Oh, jeez. Okay. Well, so that's my little. Anything else to add about Twitter backgrounds I forgot to mention?
Personally, I kind of have a pet peeve when people have pictures of every single like social media account on the side with their links.
Oh, the worst I've seen is when someone has like a picture with them, like 5 pictures of them with some random social media person.
Yeah.
And it's like
me and Scoble.
Exactly. And it's like, and they're so small that they could totally be photoshopped because like they're low res. And you
That
wonder.
would be the saddest day of your life when you're photoshopping yourself like with Tim O'Reilly.
Yeah, wow.
That's not. No, don't do that. That's good. If you guys take one thing away from the show today, don't Photoshop yourself next to social media or internet celebrities, please. Let's do the news. Let's talk a little bit about the news.
So actually, sort of relating to the background.
Nope.
That's
Trying
Ron's
to jump,
branding.
don't jump the graphic, please.
I know.
Let the graphic play.
So actually, I was just saying, relating to the background issue we were just talking about, Twitter this week launched Blackbird Pie, which is basically just the option to embed tweets. So like typically bloggers or people referencing tweets just take a screenshot of a tweet, place it in the blog. But now Twitter has a feature where you can actually embed the tweet, so all the links are active, and it actually pulls in the background of the user, so and embeds it right in line. So what do you guys think about that? Do you think that's a main? Well, one of the big complaints of this feature that people mentioned was that you kind of have to go to a separate site, media.twitter.com/blackbird-pie. We'll put the link in the chat room. There it is.
Yeah.
And so you just basically paste the permalink right there, and it generates the embed code. But people were complaining that you have to go to the separate site instead of have it being just an option right on the tweet stream itself. But at the same time, I don't feel like this is a feature that many people use that much. So probably.
I could see it being really cool for if someone built a script that would just pull the embed code, so it'd constantly update on like a blog or like a WordPress or something. That'd be really cool.
Yeah, that would be cool.
Or like a company
sure,
site.
You know, they're probably just putting it out there, and if depending on how people use it and how it works, maybe they'll expand. I mean, they don't seem to be in like that kind of a rush. They
Or
sort of.
like a
like a
puzzle
newspaper
piece,
could be
not so
cool.
much
Like if you have an article and you want to embed like a quote or something, that's pretty cool. I
Yeah,
think.
no, I mean, I think there's a lot of potential applications for something like this, and I'm thinking what the SEO impact of something like it is going to be.
It would pull from Twitter, so
Yeah.
yeah, I don't know.
So that's kind of interesting. But yeah, I mean, I think they're probably sort of floating this out there, want to see how it gets used, and then maybe decide to make it part of the basic functionality. I mean, you know, they dragged their feet for like a year before adding lists after it was obvious that Twitter needed lists. So I feel like, you know, they're kind of slow and steady and
I
not
want
in a
send
rush.
message to a group or send message to a list.
Yeah,
That
that,
I want
that opens
that.
up spam
There's an
issues.
outside.
That,
There's
like,
an
way
outside
opens up
thing that
spam.
does it. I fail though. I don't remember exactly what it is off the top of my head. But there's an outside thing that does it where you can create a
Yeah.
group and
But
send.
Is
basically
that against TOS technically?
oh, I'm sure it's
Yeah,
got to
because
be.
anything that's automated, they like basically block.
Yeah, it's basically like create Yammer within Twitter would be that, like have the ability to sort of, and that's what lists sort of seemed like it was originally going to be, but it's much more focused on following. Like it's a great way to keep your eye on
More
what
than
certain people are saying,
engaging.
but you can't just blast things to your list. I agree with Mike. I don't know what they would do about preventing people from using
mean,
that to just pollute my
So I was
stream.
at Twitter's HQ last year, and we talked about uses for small businesses. And one of the things that we definitely mentioned was the idea of having opt-in kind of subscription lists, so that if, say, Kogi Barbecue had a specific area, say they had LA, and they wanted to say people could follow this, and it would be this opt-in, one post once, received by many, right? And we came up with the idea of, without modifying the database too much, at least what the database was back then, I don't know what it is now, but the idea of using an alternative version of tags, or of hashtags. So instead of using hashtags, it'd be something else that would be unique as opposed to being generic. And then anyone who could opt into that hashtag would then be like an auto-subscribe. It'd be an opt-in. So
Right,
then you
and
could
then
you
no
could
one
do
else
it.
would see it.
Yeah, and then you could do a blast in that sense, where if like say Kogi had the whatever Kogi tag, anyone who opted into it would then be able to just receive the message only to them and it'd be a one-time blast. And that was one way of solving it. But yeah, I still think it's going to be something that they might look at when they have more of their business offerings rolled out. But it was definitely something we talked about in depth.
Yeah, I mean, all of that stuff, I feel like eventually they'll figure these things out and they'll bring that functionality. It just seems like, they're so focused still on just growing this.
But you've got to have something like that, otherwise you're going to open up like massive amounts of spam, which would just kill Twitter.
Yeah, I mean, spam is already a growing issue there. I don't think they want to invite like all of these additional ways to just go nuts with it. If you want to take another look at my screen, I actually tried out a link, and here's how it. So here's how it would look on your blog, and then here is the massive amount of code that you'd be putting onto there.
Oh, it's actually like. It's not like a JavaScript, it's actually like the...
Yeah, it's CSS.
It's the full static HTML.
It is.
Yes, so it actually pulls the... so if you embed that on their site, it will attempt to pull your site CSS to style the
right, yeah.
embed, so.
Interesting.
Yeah.
There you go. And then they just say copy and paste. And it works on WordPress. I'm assuming it's working on like a bunch of different blogging
Well, just basic
platforms.
HTML, so yeah.
So
next story.
Another big story, not directly Twitter related, but certainly affecting Twitter, and that was the Facebook news. So it was announced that McDonald's would be the first brand.
Facebook
to,
again.
Facebook, your favorite company, to experiment with their location feature. Many were expecting Facebook to announce their location feature at F8. Was it 3 weeks ago, I think? But McDonald's would basically be partnering with Facebook, and this is part of a bigger ad buy on Facebook as a whole, but part of the feature would be a location-based feature to, when you're at a McDonald's, to basically insert what you purchased or McDonald's things in your stream. And how do you think this affects Twitter?
Yeah, whoever is McDonald's social media genius that came up with that idea, I just bought a Big Mac at McDonald's, should be fired. Really?
I mean, I think, again,
Who cares?
Some brands.
Who cares what you had at
We've
McDonald's? Yeah, that's bad. Who cares?
We've actually discussed this before, that it seems
Spam.
like that's the big jump nobody's figured out yet, is like everybody wants to check in, or checking in online and doing virtual things at business is becoming increasingly popular. Yeah. But people want it to have a real world impact. They want to I want to check in.
To who's reading it? Otherwise,
brands need to do
cares?
it in a less direct way. They are missing that. They're so used to old school media where they have to be in a magazine ad going, get a free Big Mac, and it's that direct.
Using it basically as a standard communications thing, where it's I'm going to push out, push out, push out.
Yeah, it needs to be more subtle. It needs to be more in a context.
Yeah, I mean, I agree that hey, check in at McDonald's and tell us all that you're eating disgusting McDonald's food. It's it's not an appealing proposition to most people. But I feel like Facebook is making these. I think they're going about it the right way, whereas a lot of these geolocation services are going about it backwards. They're all building communities without working with the brands at all. So you've got this huge community that can't wait to go check in at Starbucks and get a free coffee, but Starbucks doesn't know who they are or what they're talking about. So I think this makes more sense to me. Facebook is going into the big places where people go and saying, hey, people are going to start coming here, and that once they have that relationship, I mean, doesn't that put them way ahead of Gowalla and Foursquare
yes
and even
no.
Twitter?
Yes and no, because I think with Facebook, I think Facebook, part of that has to do with reputation, and I think there's a big social currency that exists through basically bragging rights on the Facebook that is less prevalent in other forms of social media, other platforms. But in regards to the checking in the brand relationship, I mean, Foursquare is doing a good job with that, where they're teaming up, they're actually reaching out and brands are reaching into them, where you check in with the special offer program. Which we actually did that with Cilantro Media with Christine Liu. We teamed up and we did that for Fatburger. And we were one of the first people to do it. And it was directly between Foursquare and Fatburger, and it was remarkably successful.
I think that kind of relationship is going to need to exist. Whatever becomes the location check-in service is going to have relationships with brands like Fatburger.
But Foursquare has been doing that with many brands.
They have, but I just feel like it's for them they're a small company. There's only 1 million registered Foursquare users, a little more now. If Facebook comes in and starts doing it top down with the 100 biggest brands, is there room for? Maybe there is. I'm not saying definitely.
Here's why. Foursquare has an API and they're building it as a platform, as a utility for other people to use. Whereas Facebook is building it as a feature for their overall platform. Right. And so it's a different play. I feel like there's so many cool services leveraging Foursquare's API that they keep pushing that and they keep building in brand offers, and it opens up to developers to really create some cool apps that are not nearly as draconic as Facebook's
like this and then tell us you had a double
exactly.
cheeseburger.
So I mean, I think that's where
McDonald's
we'll
feels
grow.
about the fact that once your community reaches a certain number of people, Facebook owns it and not you.
I'm sure
wonder how
Facebook,
McDonald's feels
doesn't
about
really
that.
understand that.
I'm sure that they probably
No,
don't.
I'm thinking they're just like, hey, people like chicken nuggets.
They won't
and now
have
they'll
any
tell their
control
friends.
over it. They won't be able to, it's.
But I mean, look at Twitter. It's the same thing that Twitter has a great API. The majority of early users never consumed or worked with Twitter through the website. They use it through clients, and that's what led to its growth. Simple protocol, or say simple functionality that can be duplicated on multiple platforms.
Right.
That even the lowest common denominator with someone with SMS and nothing else could still participate. I think what Foursquare is doing in the same sense is why it could be the underdog that could end up being a little more successful.
Yeah, no.
Simple is key.
Yeah.
There was an article I read last night about, and I'm not on that side of things, but it was this other platform, this old platform, it's something 3. It started with an M. Maybe somebody who's a bigger geek than me will know. It was this big thing where you can develop sites or manage. It was actually managing. I'll find it. I'll find it, and you know what I'll do is I'll find it, and I will post it the link to this article as a comment when we get this video up.
Do so.
But it raised a good point about this old platform and Facebook platform. At first everybody loves it because it's got all these other things,
right.
and then what happens is it gets so convoluted and so hard to use, and there's so many apps and so many things, and they're changing things all the time, and it's confusing. And social media is what I do, and I still sometimes have to click on 10 different things to figure out what to do on Facebook. I think simple is key, and I think that's what's appealing about Twitter, and I think that's what's appealing about Foursquare as well. Is it's very simple. You're accomplishing these same things, and yet simple and direct, and you can pick the little things you want instead of this whole all-encompassing, overwhelming, confusing thing.
Well, I think it's that, but it's also, I mean, looking at Twitter, right? It's utility. There's a real reason, like using Twitter in specific use cases and in your environment has a direct impact, or can have a direct impact on what you're doing. It could be like if you're out with friends, you want to communicate, you want to catch.
Sure.
So there's actually a core utility to it.
Yeah.
Well, I think originally Facebook was very like a cool, look, I have pictures and I'm sharing, and that's great. But how does that impact my daily life? It only started to really like have that type of deep engagement on your direct life. I feel like Twitter had that up front, and Foursquare has it up front, and so on and so forth.
Yeah, I mean, I think
didn't do
Facebook
that.
would have said, I don't know how accurate this is, but their value proposition was always like, well, we're going to keep you in touch with people you otherwise would have no way of keeping in touch with.
Yeah, and while it's a great to have.
Yeah,
it's
but how do you
not-
monetize that? And
Well,
so
I mean-
once they couldn't figure
Right.
that out, they started throwing all this other stuff in there and taking
Well, I
away
mean,
our friends.
there's advertising, but it didn't work out quite as they'd sort of dreamed it would, like
there's
quite how it did
Beacon.
for Google. So yeah, I mean, obviously they're throwing other stuff out there and trying to see how they can sort of get corporate sort of sponsors more involved, and how they can use all this data they're collecting. And
Well, my thing is that with Twitter, like I can put something out there and have immediate response that has a core value to that impacts what I'm doing that day.
Yeah.
With Facebook, it's like, oh, look what I did. This is great, but it's a nice to have, but it's not necessarily going to change anything I'm going to do.
No, I agree with that. It doesn't feel as essential, and it doesn't feel like, I mean, Twitter. There's whole conversations I'll have with people, and it'll be exclusively through like direct messaging on
But
Twitter.
even when it looked like Cookie Barbecue, right? With what we did, it was, there was all these different tools we could have used to grow a brand on, and we actually
Right.
ignored Facebook for the first year and a half because there was no direct core value or utility to using it over Twitter.
It lacks the immediacy. People are checking in on Facebook, but they're not always on Facebook.
Well, it's immediacy. It's also the fact that it's on the ground and it's relevant in real time. That's
Right.
what you don't get on Facebook.
I just actually found what that thing was. It was Microsoft Project 2003.
Oh yeah.
And I'm
Yeah.
going to post the link in the room.
Okay.
It's a great article, by the way. Oh, it's not letting me post it here.
I think it was letting me post before.
It's saying I have a limited character. And
Okay.
But whatever
Whoa,
Twitter
we'll
does,
post it up there.
it's going to be, or Facebook's rather. I think they have 400 million plus users,
Yeah.
and 100 million daily mobile users, which is huge. So you can imagine this getting pretty popular pretty quickly with brands. So
Definitely. So we were talking a little bit about the background of Kogi. Let's get a little. Let's give us the short version. How that sort of idea came about of like, let's unite this sort of food truck business with a online brand. And then at the time you were sort of putting that together, did you have this sense like, oh, in another year this is going to be like everywhere and everyone's going to do it?
I mean, it started as a friend of mine, Eric Shin, who I'd known for a while, and he'd hooked me up with a lot of work. called me and was like, hey, my brother-in-law has this idea for a food truck. I'm like, okay, random. And he's like, yeah, we have the truck already, good to go. And we have this recipe. We're gonna do a tasting in a week. But he's like, we don't know how to market it. Like everyone else involved is like culinary, hospitality, or hotel background. They're not,
right.
No marketing background. They had no name, no logo, nothing. And he's like, can you help out? And I'm like, yeah, I totally owe you. So we'll sit down. We sat down over 2 lunches and kind of just talked through the idea. Went through kind of the same thing the same kind of process I do with my clients. It's like how to create a good brand, and came up with a name, came up with a really fast logo, and came up with the idea that kind of looked at the problems of the business, being that one, that taco trucks have no real venue between engagements. There's no persistent venue.
Right.
And 2, you're on the ground, you're mobile. Like what else? So what tools solve that problem in a way that? And we had no budget, so that was the thing.
Right.
So it's like what tools solve that problem in a way that we can scale and leverage without necessarily having to spend money. And I had a good following on Twitter. I was pretty active in LA tech, so I think it felt like a natural fit to solve the problems we had to solve. And along with that was also creating a really strong brand that was more than just a food. It was, we looked at Pink, we looked at Pinkberry, we looked at In-N-Out, and these cultural food icons, and how do we emulate that, and how do we become a cultural food icon? So we built this whole idea of having Kogi culture, and having this kind of engagement of street culture and art and music around the brand, and basically giving it a place to live with Twitter. And I mean, obviously it worked amazingly. But no, in a sense, I didn't predict that it would be the phenomenon it is now.
Yeah, I mean, now there's there's multiple sites devoted just to following the Twitter account of all the food trucks. 100
food trucks in LA, I think now. There's a bunch around the country. There's a quote-unquote food truck mobile food revolution, where now food carts are using Twitter all over, especially in San Francisco, Portland, New York. I mean, you're hearing everyone adopting that whole entire model, which is great. I mean, Kogi won a Bon Appetit Award for guerrilla marketing in the food industry. So that's pretty impressive.
Yeah.
I mean, it's the best of the best in that sense. But no, it was more about stacking the deck. It's like you have this launch that we had no funding. It was like a credit card. We had the truck for free for a month, and we had everyone was going to work on their own. And how do you stack the deck in your favor, and how do you build up your advantages? And that was just the right fit for the right problems that we had to solve.
Yeah. So what's like the number one thing if I, had like my own food truck or a small business and I'm coming to social media? Like, I feel like a lot of people sort of join Twitter and are like, well, I'm here, done. Now I'm just going to update a couple times a day and the crowds will flow in. Like, what do you need to do to get to that next step? Like,
I've said this like a million times. You can't just go on Twitter or Foursquare or whatever and magically you'll have all the success. It doesn't work that way.
Yeah.
It's like any other form of marketing or communications. You've got to, follow the right strategy that has relevance and value to your audience. Like for Kogi Barbecue, we created a bunch of buzz, and once you heard about it, the only way to find the truck was to be on Twitter. So that's how we amassed this huge audience.
That's
out
what
of
I
necessity.
thought was brilliant about it, is that they're traveling around. It's like, how do you find them? Yeah. How do you know? How do people know?
Yeah, so the only way was to be on Twitter. And even when I went to Twitter headquarters, they were like, yeah, I got a lot of people on Twitter, because apparently people were joining because they wanted to find out about the food truck.
Yeah, I mean, I was hearing it on like NPR in the morning.
We've been published in probably every major media outlet in the world. Well, I mean, definitely the US. We've had stuff out of Asia, Europe. I mean, I had someone call me from the Middle East saying, hey, I heard about this Kogi thing you're doing. And I'm just like, how the hell did that happen?
How did you hear about it?
Yeah. It's pretty, insane, to be honest. I can't even imagine. But
yeah, but that was, NPR, I was thinking, like, this is an audience that not only do they probably not know about the Kogi truck, because at that point it was sort of in the, LA tech world, it was sort of a known thing. But it was like, these people probably don't even understand Twitter yet. They're still learning about what Twitter's all about.
One thing, so Ev actually used Kogi as a reference in his TED speech, or his TED presentation, which was awesome. Yeah. But a lot of people, Twitter got a lot of exposure because whenever someone had to mention Kogi on the news, or on KCAL 9 or Fox 11 News or National or Time Magazine or Newsweek, they mentioned this whole block about Twitter when it was. So it actually drove a lot of PR for them, which was actually really cool. But it just, even when we ramped up, the first week we were going into clubs and hustling people out and giving away, hey, try our fucking food, right? But then it became like I invited Christine Liu and a couple other food bloggers out, and like, hey, try this, and that created some buzz. And I invited my local audience. Whenever there was like Brian Souls was in town, and we all had to meet up, so I had them drop by like 100 tacos for everybody. Yeah. We think with women in tech, and so we actually seeded it with key audiences, and also around tech, around colleges, specifically UCLA, and around nightlife, and we started working with clubs and so on and so forth. And And you see in those audiences that you want to embody the brand and the culture that you want to see grow, and you just keep pushing it. And once you do that, you start getting a little bit of press, and you get the bloggers lead to like LA Weekly, that leads to LA Times, and you keep leveraging that, you leverage that, you leverage that, and then you pull in and you do a little bit of outreach in the right way, and just kind of be aware of how it's growing, because that's the thing. A lot of people will launch a product, especially in technology, and they'll start having a momentum that people get behind, but they don't it may not coincide with what their vision of what their company was supposed to be, but it still may be a success. It's being aware of what that growth has been and where it's happening and who's behind it, and then kind of shifting your model to embrace that and promote it and let it go with, maybe not be your vision, but it could still grow the company and support in a way you may never have imagined.
Yeah, momentum is never bad unless it's bad momentum. Negative, well, negative, negative momentum is bad. Let's word it like that.
It was really funny.
Yes.
We had a whole Kogi versus Baja Fresh Twitter war.
Right. Well, because Baja Fresh was sort of starting to move in on the idea.
They tried to copy it, and I actually at South by Southwest this year, I met the person who was behind that account who was tweeting against me the whole time. It was hilarious.
Oh, man.
She was like, "You," and I was like, "Oh."
Fun.
Twitter enemies.
Well, and now you're doing this other truck, right? Or not truck, bus. This is a bus.
So
this
it's
one.
a World
food
Fair.
Is amazing, I have to say.
Yeah. So Andy Von Willigan is its chef, and she's the sous chef on Hell's Kitchen, and she's also executive sous chef that opened up 13 and 14 Michael Minno's restaurants.
All right.
And her food's amazing. Everything's made from scratch. Like there's even the sauces she actually makes from scratch the day before. It's ridiculous. But it's a double-decker food bus. So it's the bottom floor is a gourmet kitchen. The top floor is this viewing deck. You can go upstairs.
This was outside the Streamies.
It was outside the Streamies. Yeah, we put that together.
Right.
And we've had DJs on top. It's really cool. We're talking to a couple brands about doing a battle of bands off the top of the bus, which is it's definitely a new concept. And I think what's interesting about it is that it gives you a real physical venue in addition to the virtual venue.
Yeah, I mean, then you've got this whole floor of a bus.
It's a whole different experience.
Yeah.
The thing too is like standing in the street is sometimes what you want, like that mobile, but sometimes even when you want that like quick and easy, fast, like you still kind of want to sit and like have it.
I can't wait till the summer when we're gonna have a DJ up there. We'll have drinks and you'll be partying on top of the bus in the sun. That's what I'm waiting for. So
gonna have it. Sometimes they do make the environment around it though part of the experience. I know in my neighborhood there's a wine place that does wine flights every Thursday, and then the Let's Be Frank hot dog truck.
Oh yeah.
Let's Be
It's
Frank,
outside.
That's adorable.
And it's their hot dogs are amazing. It's like all organic, grass-fed, like really natural, and I mean it's great. You can go in, get have your 4 glasses of wine, and then you come outside and there's this hot dog truck waiting, and they've got a little area with some seats and everything. So it is. I mean, I think having a venue
that are popping up as well.
Yeah, but having a physical venue around the truck or on top of the truck, as it were, it really does help the whole experience. It makes it feel more like you're actually going to an event or going to something cool instead.
Well, and
of
also
just,
differentiate the gourmet trucks from like a regular like a lunch truck.
Right.
But another thing is that I don't know if you knew about this, but the Brig was the first spot that Kogi started at because we started getting tickets getting almost impounded a couple times. So we had to find spots, and the Brig reached out to us and said, "Hey, we have a slot here on Abbot Kinney. Would you come down?" And they didn't serve food; they had the bar, and the Brig they did okay. They had a local audience, but they didn't have anything crazy. When we started going there, we increased our revenue from 3 to 5 times consistently. And now, as a result of Kogi being there and creating this whole scene there. If you know, Abbot Kinney is like the food truck corridor right there. Like there's always trucks out there. But what ended up growing is this whole steam. This is whole you have people hanging out, drinking outside, meaning they're grabbing food and they're hanging. It's a hangout spot. It's not just I want to grab food, eat, and leave. It's
almost like the logic of after going out in WeHo or Hollywood, sometimes you'll see the carts with the bacon wrapped hot dogs, but you eat it even though it's vile because you're drunk.
What are you talking about?
Because
hot dogs are amazing.
No,
I've only had it once.
They're so gross.
Delicious.
They're good, but they're gross. You feel really bad about yourself after.
Well, yes, that's why, because they're so amazing.
Well, but in the food world, actually, on the Roosevelt, 25 degrees, they actually are now serving these bacon wrap hot dogs. They just launched,
but
which
the
is
ones in the cart with the peppers and the onions, if it's just a cart, to me, it just seems really unsanitary. God only knows what's flown and landed. And
it just sounds good to me.
At least a bus is the kitchen is closed off and
I think that's supposed to be illegal. I don't think they're even supposed to legally be allowed to grill on the open. But anyway, the takeaway, it's awesome. If you're in LA and you see one of those carts with the bacon wrap hot dogs,
good, but
get
it's
one.
bad. It's-
Well, the cool thing is that there's this whole food scene in LA now. Even there are some gourmet carts I've seen, but mostly
Yeah.
trucks. And so there is a street food culture that didn't exist previous to Kogi in LA, which is really awesome.
Yeah. I gotta say before we wrap up here, Scout the doggy in the chat room says, do they ever look at the chat room or just ignore you guys? I'm looking in there the whole time.
I can't see the chat room, but
He can't see the
I wish
chat
I
room
could, actually.
because he's got the eye. This is why.
I've said
No
it before.
flash.
People
but
know.
I'm in the Justin TV chat room.
Yeah, I'm watching both here. People note that we have the We're going to do something about having all these laptop screens blocking everybody. We'll figure something out. But I'd love to just have us all have iPads in here, but they won't run Flash.
HTML5. Someone needs to build a chat room.
They won't run Flash. It's just that is one. This is one of the few times where that's really actually gotten on my nerves. Because if we could all have iPads, think about how neat it would be. You could actually get to see all of us.
So I don't know. Like, I'm not. I mean, I love Apple products. I'm not a fanboy by any sense. I actually am okay with it not having Flash for a lot of reasons, coming from like understanding development and whatnot.
Right.
Matthew Arvale, who's my partner over at
And hanging out in the Justin TV chat.
Oh, is he cool? I mean, he formed this article that I guess Steve Jobs had replied on why we don't have Flash, and it was just.
It was just very thoughtful.
And it was very
yeah.
thoughtful, but I mean, fundamentally, the one reason why I actually agree on is that most Flash developers today are not programmers, and because Flash is basically it's a programming language in the sense you can create a really bad code that's really heavy and really. Like just use tons of resources to do the simplest things because you're a designer and you're an animator. You don't know how to efficiently code, and there's no way to limit that. So once you put it on a smaller mobile device, you can just kill the device and not even realize it.
Yeah, they heat up and
Yeah, well, I
that's
think
just
because
no way.
no one, because again, they're not necessarily hardcore programmers that do
Right.
these animations, so they don't know how to optimize it. So I get that's one reason why I agree that it may be an issue.
Yeah, we talked about it in this week's stars. His explanation is a little disingenuous because the whole thing is like he's not putting Flash in there. Maybe it's I don't want
there's
the
a lot
device
of
for that. It's like he doesn't want you to watch
reasons.
Hulu. He doesn't
Yeah.
want you to watch Ustream.
But isn't Hulu now they have the alternate formats? I think a lot of the videos have now have alternate that you can view it on the iPad.
Yeah, well, Netflix has an app which is a huge step
No, but
forward.
even without the app, but you just put it in H.264, and it's hard as a hardware chip, and it'll play just fine.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
I am a bit of a fangirl, but I felt that the letter was half manipulative.
Oh no, it was a great marketing move. I totally recognize that.
It was
like,
total
awesome.
marketing.
But I do
It
agree
was-
with like some of the points.
I agree with some of the points as well.
No, I don't think he's entirely wrong. And the Adobe guy's response was pretty weak. It just made it seem like he kind of knows that.
Adobe should just
People are onto
Adobe
him.
should just create HTML5 editor and just like basically the same thing as Flash, but just export to HTML5 and be done. They'll just own the market.
I do understand not wanting to, as a company, wait for Adobe to get on board with stuff before you can progress.
There is that issue. I mean, like because it's such a mainstay in terms of. I come from a design background, and they're a mainstay in the software. Like the minute one comes out, like you see a big shift in things coming forward and so on and so forth. And it's kind of annoying.
I hate working in Flash. When I have a design client, I encourage them to not use Flash for a multitude of reasons. I like a Flash element.
Right.
I like a piece of Flash, a little game or a Flash a banner or something minimal, but a whole website in Flash,
I do get irked when I
don't
go
like
to
it.
a website. It's all just Flash animation. And
Can I ask you guys a question?
Sure, yeah.
What's your, because with Twitter, every account has its own use, a specific purpose of why it's there. My personal account's very different from my business account and so on and so forth.
Mm-hmm.
What are your guys' use of Twitter?
Well,
on your account? Like, what's
mine
your focus?
has really shifted. When I first joined Twitter, it was because I was working at Mahalo and I was trying to stay on top of like what's buzzing today, what's everybody talking about today. So I really joined it as a news service. It was just like watching. I would follow the most popular people, and I would just really watch it for what's popping up, and is there going to be something that's really sort of memey or trendy today. And then I started to sort of participate myself a little more, and it became more about generally promoting myself, stuff I was doing this week in YouTube, this week at startups, other Mahalo projects or whatever. And now it's a little bit of all of that, and it's sort of my personal brand online. It's where I live online all day.
So you think it's to kind of like communicate what you're up to professionally and kind of engage people in that sense?
Yeah, I mean, it's everything from, I don't really blog much anymore. I've sort of moved that over to Twitter, where when I have a thought, I'll just sort of throw it over there.
I just started blogging, which is something I've avoided for a long time. But.
Yeah, I blogged for years, and I still have a blog, but I still have several blogs actually. But yeah, I rarely will post unless I have like I just saw Iron Man 2 and I want to write a whole review. Like if it's it's usually just something offhand I can just sort of send out there in the world. I sort of live in Twitter and then I send it out everywhere else.
Gotcha.
So I don't have to go to Facebook if I don't
I
feel
have the
like
same way.
it.
Everything's linked to that one account.
Yeah, I mean I'll just send that to everywhere where people want to connect with me, and it's sort of my one-stop shop.
Okay.
And I like Posterous a lot, so I'll use that for blogging now too. So it's basically Twitter and a blog.
Yeah,
I'm more of a Tumblr.
I'm on Tumblr, but
I have both. I like Tumblr, and I love the community that's grown up around Tumblr.
Yes.
That's my favorite part of Tumblr.
Me
Is
too.
like you wouldn't get Selleck waterfall sandwich on Posterous. It's just that is a Tumblr world unto itself.
Yeah.
So I get the
So
love of
easy
Tumblr,
to
but
use.
it
It's
is I just started
I'm their
using Posterous.
unofficial, unpaid evangelist. I love Tumblr. And for clients that will never, no matter what you do, understand the back end of WordPress ever,
Yes.
it's like, look, let's
Well, who wants to-
skin a
it's so much
Tumblr
easier.
and let's make this like the easiest blog you've ever ran.
It's so much
well,
faster
I love
and
you
easier.
you can actually add the raw HTML directly to do some cool stuff with the layouts. But what about you guys? What about you guys do with your Twitter?
When I joined Twitter at first, I was like, I don't get it. Like, why can't I just text all my friends?
Right.
Why do I need to publicly say, like, if anything, that's negative? I didn't get it. It really was maybe 3 to 6 months after joining that I found my Twitter niche. And I use it for everything. I use it for a little bit of sharing stuff I like, for a little bit of self-promotion. Here's my show I'm co-hosting. Here's my website. I use it for a lot of question asking. I have a great network. There's people who know things I don't, and that is useful to me throughout the day. And it's where like I can instantly get an answer and not have to go through 15 different pages of Google and try different things before I find that one thing. Like when I needed something to show me how many times a hashtag had been done,
Right,
and
yeah.
I tweeted that out and found a great tool for that.
Okay.
So it's a mix now at this point.
So personal branding and then just information sourcing or data sourcing,
yeah.
essentially. Yeah.
And then sharing as well.
Well, still personal branding. Well, for you at least, it would be personal branding still.
Yeah.
What about you?
No, I mean, for me personally, it's pretty much a lot of that same stuff. I think I used to be a huge RSS reader guy. I had all my feeds, and now pretty much Twitter and Twitter lists have replaced that. So it's just a more efficient way of consuming information, especially if you don't have time to do a bunch of reading. You can just kind of quickly skim and get an idea for what's going on. So that's my main use.
I'd be curious to find out, maybe even from FeedBurner or something like that, if there's been a significant dip in RSS subscriptions since Twitter.
It's interesting.
That would be very interesting to
I don't know,
see.
because I mean, RSS was never really a mainstream
Yeah,
thing
it
anyway.
was,
so.
yeah, that's true. But I always found with Twitter users, it's always like it's either information consumption, it's going to be information sourcing, branding, support services, or just like basically a light blog. Kind of as the 5 main things people use it for. Then the people that are really good use it for like real hardcore engagement, which is great too.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's the one thing, obviously, that
Oh,
it takes
and content
a while.
distribution, obviously.
Yeah, it takes a while, like, in there to really get how to engage. I think at first it's
Well, I mean,
intimidating.
all of those things work. It just depends on what you're using it for.
Right. Caligula in the chat room just called me plump and hilarious, and Alana thought to point that out to me. Thank you, Caligula. I appreciate it. I appreciate that in equal measure. All right, well, thank you for joining us. Packed a lot in. We went a little over. We were trying to hold the show to 40 minutes, but it was going so well, I didn't want to cut it off. So thank you to our guest, Mike Prasad. Thanks for being here. I really appreciate it.
Anytime.
To newsman Mike Bracco. Thank you for your diligent research on how to flirt with people on Twitter. Thank you, as always, to my co-host, Alana Joy. I'm Lon Harris. We'll see you next time on This Week in Twitter.